Everyone knows what happened on the day Jesus died. The trial, the cross, the darkness at noon, the earthquake. We have heard the story 1,000 times, but almost no one ever asks what happened that night. After the crowds went home, after the soldiers left, after the sky cleared and the ordinary world moved on as if nothing had happened. What did his mother do that first night, in a world where her son was dead? Because that is the night no one preaches about. The night after, when the adrenaline of the horror has drained away and the people have gone and you are left alone in the dark with the unthinkable new fact of your life, that they are gone and they are not coming back. Anyone who has lost someone they love knows that night. The first night. It is its own particular kind of hell. The house too quiet, the bed too empty, the mind unable to accept what the day has done. And Mary, the mother of Jesus, lived through that night 2,000 years ago. The first night in a world without her son. In this video, we are not going to retell the crucifixion. You know that story. Instead, we are going to do something almost no one ever does. We are going to follow Mary through the hours of that first night. From the moment they took her son's body down from the cross, through the rushed burial before sundown, through the long, silent, unbearable Sabbath night, all the way to the first gray light of the morning that would change everything. Built from the Gospels, from the customs of first-century Jewish mourning, and from the heart of a mother. This is the story of the longest night of Mary's life, and what she did in it. A note before we begin. The Gospels record the events of that evening, but are silent on the private hours of the night itself. So part of this is a careful reconstruction, built from what we know of their world and of her. Where we are imagining, we will say so. It begins in the last hour of daylight, with a dead sun, a borrowed tomb, and a sun racing toward the horizon. It was Friday afternoon. Jesus had died around the 9th hour, what we would call 3 in the afternoon. And immediately, a terrible clock began to tick. Because in just a few hours, at sundown, the Sabbath would begin. And once the Sabbath began, no work could be done, including the work of burying the dead. A body could not be left hanging into the Sabbath. The law forbade it. So everything, taking the body down, preparing it, burying it, had to happen in the next 2 or 3 hours, against the setting sun. And Mary was still there. She had stood at the foot of the cross through the whole ordeal when most of his followers had fled. She had not looked away. And now she watched as a man stepped forward to claim the body, a wealthy member of the council named Joseph of Arimathea, who had gone with great courage to ask the Roman governor for the body of Jesus, with the help of another man, Nicodemus. They began the careful, sorrowful work of taking Jesus down from the cross. And here, the tradition has held for 2,000 years that they place the body of Jesus into the arms of his mother. Think about that moment for Mary. The last time she had held this body, fully in her arms, he had been a newborn, soft and warm and new, wrapped in cloths in a cave in Bethlehem. And now, at the end, she held him again. No longer a baby, a grown man, still cold, the body she had brought into the world, now leaving it. There was no time to grieve properly. That is one of the cruelties of that afternoon. The sun was racing down, and the Sabbath was coming, and there was so much to do. A mother who wanted nothing more than to hold her son and weep had instead to move, to act, to do the urgent work of burial before the light failed. And so they did what they could in the time they had. In the Jewish custom of the day, Preparing a body for burial meant washing it and anointing it with spices and ointments and wrapping it carefully in linen cloths. Nicodemus had brought a large quantity of myrrh and aloes, but there was not enough time to do it fully, properly, the way love demanded. They had to rush. And there is a detail here almost too poignant to bear. The spices they wrapped him in, the myrrh, was one of the very gifts the wise men had brought to him as an infant. Myrrh, a burial spice, given to a newborn king, and now used at last for its terrible purpose. The fragrance of his birth had become the fragrance of his death, and his mother was there for both. They carried the body a short distance, to a tomb in a garden nearby, a new tomb, cut into the rock that had never been used. It belonged to Joseph of Arimathea. There was no time to take the body anywhere else. This tomb was close, and the sun was almost gone. So they laid the Son of God in a borrowed grave, and the Gospels record a small, heartbreaking detail. The women watched where he was laid. They studied the place. They memorized it, because they intended to come back after the Sabbath, when work was permitted again, to finish the burial properly, to give his body the full and loving care that the rush had not allowed. Mary stood at the entrance of that tomb and fixed the place in her mind, already planning her return. And think about what that small detail reveals about a mother's heart, even in the depths of shock. Even now, even crushed by the worst grief imaginable, Mary was still thinking of him, still planning to care for him, still doing what mothers do, making sure her child would be properly tended. The rush of the burial offended everything in her. He deserved better. He deserved the full rites, the proper care, the unhurried love. And so even as the stone was about to close, she was already resolved to come back and finish what the son had cut short. A mother's care does not stop at death. It was the last thing she could still do for him, and she was already determined to do it. And then the great stone was rolled across the entrance. The light inside the tomb went out, and on the other side of that stone stood a mother whose son was now sealed in a grave. The sun touched the horizon. The Sabbath was beginning, and there was nothing left to do. Stand with her at that stone for a moment. On one side, the cold dark of the tomb and her son. On the other side, the rest of her life. That stone was a door closing on everything. For 33 years, she had been able to reach him, to see him, to touch him. First as the child in her arms, then as the boy in her house, then as the man she watched from the edges of the crowd. And now a wheel of rock stood between them, and she could not pass it. The finality of that stone, rolling shut, is something every person who has ever stood at a grave understands. It is the moment the world divides into before and after. And so Mary had to do the thing every grieving person eventually has to do. She had to walk away from the grave. She had to turn her back on the place where her son's body lay and walk back into a world that would go on without him. Imagine that walk. The garden falling dark. The path back toward the city. Every step carrying her further from the tomb. The disciple John beside her. The young man to whom, just hours before, Jesus had entrusted his mother from the cross. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. So now John walked with her. This woman who was suddenly his responsibility. This mother who had just lost her child. We do not know exactly where they went that night. The Gospel of John tells us that from that hour, the disciple took Mary into his own home. So perhaps they made their way to a house in Jerusalem, a borrowed room, a place to shelter for the Sabbath. The other women would have been with them, Mary Magdalene and Mary the wife of Clopas, and the others who had stood near the cross, a small, broken group, walking through the dusk together, and consider the strangeness of the world around them as they walked, because it was the eve of Passover Sabbath, one of the holiest, most festive nights of the entire Jewish year. All around them, the city was preparing to celebrate. Lamps were being lit in every home. Families were gathering. The smell of the Passover meal was in the air. Jerusalem was full of pilgrims, full of light, full of the joy of the feast. And through all that light and celebration walked a mother whose son had just been executed. There is a particular cruelty in grieving during a time of celebration, when the whole world is rejoicing and your own heart is shattered. Mary walked through a city lit up for the holiest feast of the year, carrying a grief so heavy she could barely stand, surrounded by a joy she could not share. Everyone who has ever grieved through a holiday knows that specific loneliness. And as they walked, the reality would have been settling over her in waves, the way it does. The shock of the day beginning to wear off, and underneath it, the unbearable new fact. He's gone. The mind cannot hold it all at once. It comes in pieces. A moment of forgetting, and then the crashing remembering. He's gone. My son is dead. Perhaps she replayed the day. The mind does that cruelly after a loss, runs the terrible events again and again. The sound of the crowd, the sight of him on the cross, his voice saying, "Woman, behold your son," his last breath, the darkness. Perhaps each memory hit her again as she walked, fresh as a wound. And perhaps, too, beneath it all, there was something even harder for her to hold. The memory of the promises. The angel who had told her decades before that her son would reign over a kingdom with no end. The wonders at his birth, everything she had treasured in her heart for 33 years. And now he lay dead in a borrowed tomb. How could both things be true? How could the promises in this grave both be real? She had no answer. She could only walk and grieve, and somehow keep breathing. They reached the house, and now began the part of grief that no one sees. The part that happens behind closed doors, in the quiet, when the public horror of the day gives way to the private agony of the night. Someone would have lit a lamp. In the custom of their world, an oil lamp burning in the dark. And in its small warm glow, the little group of mourners would have gathered. Mary, the other women, John. Survivors of the worst day of their lives, sitting together in the lamplight, not knowing what to do with themselves. Because here is the thing about the first night. There is nothing to do. During the day, there had been the terrible work of the burial, the moving, the wrapping, the urgency. There had been things to do with the hands, tasks to fill the unbearable hours. But now it was the Sabbath. Now nothing could be done. And grief with nothing to do is the hardest grief of all. Imagine Mary in that room, a mother whose entire life had been spent caring for this son, feeding him, tending him, worrying over him, doing for him. And now there was nothing left to do for him. No meal to prepare, no wound to tend, no comfort to give. Even the burial had been taken from her hands by the setting sun. The lifelong work of loving him had ended all at once, and her hands did not know what to do without it. And in that quiet, the grief would have come fully. During the crisis of the day, there is often a kind of merciful numbness. The body does what must be done. But in the still of the night, when there is nothing left to do, the numbness wears off, and the full weight arrives. Perhaps Mary wept then, in the lamplight, the deep, exhausted weeping of a mother who has lost her child. Perhaps the other women held her. Perhaps they wept together. Perhaps there were long silences when no one could find any words at all. Because there are no words for this. And we should not imagine that Mary's faith made this easy for her. This is important. Sometimes we picture Mary as so holy, so full of grace, that she floated above her grief, that she somehow knew it would be all right, that Sunday was coming. But there is no reason to believe she felt that night. The Gospels show us that none of his followers expected the resurrection. They were shattered, hopeless, hiding. Mary, in her humanity, would have grieved as a real mother grieves. Faith does not erase grief. Even the most faithful heart on the night it loses a child simply breaks. And there was a particular torment waiting for her in that room, one that other grieving mothers are at least spared. Because Mary alone carried the secret of who her son was. For 33 years she had held the angel's promise in her heart, that this child was the Son of God, that his kingdom would have no end. She had pondered it through every stage of his life, and now he was dead. So her grief was not only the unbearable loss of a son, it was the apparent collapse of everything she had believed, everything she had been told, everything she had built her life around. Had it all been a dream? Had she been wrong? In the dark of that room, those questions would have circled her like wolves. And still, and this is the quiet miracle of Mary, there is no record that she cursed God or turned away or declared it all a lie. She simply endured it. She sat in the dark and grieved, and somehow held on, even with no answers, even with the promises in ruins. That is perhaps the truest picture of faith there is. Not a faith that feels no pain, but a faith that keeps breathing in the dark when nothing makes sense anymore. And consider who else was in that room, because their grief was tangled up with hers. There was John, the young disciple now charged with caring for her, himself shattered by the loss of the teacher he loved, trying to be strong for this grieving mother when his own heart was breaking. There was Mary Magdalene, who loved Jesus with a fierce devotion, undone by the day. There were the other women who had followed him from Galilee, who had supported his ministry, who had stood near the cross when the men had fled. A small community of the broken gathered in one room, each carrying their own version of the same unbearable loss. And in the custom of their world, this is what mourners did. They gathered. They sat together. They did not leave the bereaved alone. There is deep wisdom in that ancient practice, the simple presence of others who are grieving the same loss. No one in that room could fix anything. No one could bring him back. But they could be there, together, in the dark. And sometimes, when nothing can be done, presence is the only comfort there is. Mary was not alone that night. The people who loved her son sat with her in the lamplight, and that mattered. And there is a thought worth holding here. This small, broken group, huddled in grief in a borrowed room. These were the people on whom the entire future of the faith would rest. The mother, the beloved disciple, the faithful women. In a matter of weeks, they would be the founding witnesses of a movement that would spread across the whole world. But on this night, they did not know that, and they did not look like that. They looked like what they were, a handful of devastated people who had lost everything, sitting in the dark with no idea what came next. The night wore on, and it became the longest night of Mary's life, the beginning of the longest, emptiest day she would ever know. Because the Sabbath had begun at sundown, and it would last until sundown the next day. A full day. And on that day, the law required rest. No work, no travel beyond a short distance. And cruelly, no tending to the dead. Mary could not even go to the tomb. She could not be near her son's body. She could not do the one thing every grieving heart longs to do, to be close to the one they have lost. The law held her back. She had to wait. Think about what that day of enforced stillness would have been for her. There is a reason that, in many cultures, the bereaved are given things to do, rituals, preparations, people to receive. Activity carries you through the first unbearable stretch. But Mary was given the opposite. A full day of absolute stillness, with nothing permitted, nothing to distract her, nowhere to go, and nothing to do but sit with the rawest grief a human being can feel. Hour after hour. The light of dawn eventually creeping in. Saturday morning, but bringing no relief. Only the confirmation that yesterday had been real. He was still gone. The tomb was still sealed. The world was still a place where her son was dead. Every grieving person knows that terrible second morning when you wake and for half a second you have forgotten. And then it all comes back. And all around her, again, the holy day continued. Outside, Jerusalem kept the Sabbath. Prayers were said. The feast was observed. The ordinary holiness of the day went on, as if the world had not ended. And inside that house, a mother sat with the wreckage of her heart, going through the motions of a holy day she could barely feel. What did she do through those long hours? We are not told, but we know what grieving people do. Perhaps she sat with the other women, sharing memories of him, the way mourners do. The small stories, the moments, the things he said. Perhaps she could not speak at all. Perhaps she prayed, even when prayer felt like speaking into an empty sky. Perhaps she simply stared at the wall and let the hours pass over her like water. And perhaps, and this is the thing that makes Mary who she is, perhaps somewhere in those long hours, the habit of a lifetime held her. Because Mary had spent her whole life saying yes to God in the dark. Yes to the angel when she could not understand. Yes through the flight to Egypt. Yes through the sword Simeon had foretold. She had a lifetime of practice in trusting God when nothing made sense. And maybe, in the depths of that Sabbath, even without hope, even without understanding, some deep buried part of her kept doing what it had always done, holding on, refusing to let go of God, even in the dark. But we must be honest. She did not know Sunday was coming. As far as Mary knew, sitting in that house on that endless Sabbath, this grief was permanent. This was simply her life now. A mother who had outlived her son, who would carry this loss to her own grave. She was not waiting for a resurrection. She was, as far as she knew, simply enduring the first full day of the rest of a life without him. And there is a particular grief reserved for a parent who outlives their child, which Mary now entered. It is often said to be the loss that goes against the natural order of things, that a parent should never have to bury a child. Every expectation of life runs the other way. The child is supposed to bury the parent decades on. Mary had raised this son from infancy, had poured her whole life into him, had watched him grow into a man, and now she had survived him. She would carry forward into her own remaining years the unnatural weight of having outlived the child she bore. On that long Sabbath, that future stretched out before her, empty and wrong. And she would have thought surely of all of it. The whole life now ended. The night in the cave when he was born, his first steps in their house, the boy who stayed behind in the temple, the young man at the carpenter's bench, the day he left home to begin his mission. Every memory now edged in pain, because every memory now led here, to this sealed tomb and this empty day. That is one of the cruelties of fresh grief, that the happy memories hurt the most because they are over. The whole beautiful life of her son ran through her mind on that Sabbath, and each memory was now a wound. And then the second night came. Saturday evening, the sun went down again, and the Sabbath, at last, came to an end. But the night did not. There was still the darkness of Saturday night to endure before any dawn could come. And in some ways, this second night may have been the hardest of all, because the shock had fully worn off now. The numbness was gone. The reality had fully landed, and there was still no relief in sight. Only the long crawl toward a Sunday morning that, as far as Mary knew, held nothing but the grim task of finishing her son's burial. But notice what the end of the Sabbath meant in practical terms. Now, finally, work was permitted again. Now she could do something. And the Gospels tell us exactly what the women did with that permission. They began to prepare. Mark's Gospel says that when the Sabbath was over, the women bought spices so that they might go and anoint his body. They were getting ready to return to the tomb at first light, to finish, at last, the loving care that the rush of Friday had not allowed. Think about what that preparation meant for these grieving women and for Mary. It was the first thing they had been able to do for him in more than a day. After the helpless stillness of the Sabbath, here at last was an act of love they could perform. They could not bring him back, but they could tend his body. They could do this last thing. And so, through the night, they prepared, measuring out the spices, readying the ointments, planning to go the moment there was enough light to see the path. It is worth pausing on the love in that. They were planning to go to a sealed tomb, to a body that had been dead for nearly 2 days, to perform a task that most people would shrink from. And they were doing it out of pure love. This was not duty. It was devotion. They wanted to be near him one more time, to care for him one more time, whatever it cost. Grief, at its core, is love with nowhere to go. And these women were finding the only place left to put it. And so the last hours of the night passed in that quiet preparation. The spices made ready. The plan set. They would go at the first light of Sunday, and then they waited for the dark to thin, as the bereaved have waited through the last hours before dawn since the beginning of time. Exhausted, hollow, longing for a morning that they did not expect to bring them anything but more grief. And here we have to sit with the most extraordinary thing about this entire night. Because Mary did not know. None of them knew. As they prepared their burial spices in the dark, as they planned their sorrowful errand to the tomb, the single most important event in the history of the world was about to happen. And they had no idea. They were preparing to anoint a body that would not be there. They were grieving a death that was about to be undone. The dawn they were dreading was about to become the most joyful morning in human history. But in the dark, they did not know it. They only knew their grief. There is something almost unbearably tender in that on the very edge of the resurrection, the mother of Jesus sat in the dark, preparing to mourn. That her deepest grief came in the last hours before her greatest joy. That the night was darkest just before the most important dawn that would ever break. And then, at last, the light began to come. The first gray of Sunday morning, thinning the dark at the edge of the world. The longest night of Mary's life was finally ending. The Gospels tell us that very early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, the women set out for the tomb with their spices. Mary Magdalene is named as going. The accounts vary in their details, as eyewitness accounts of an overwhelming morning do. But the women went, in the first light, to finish the burial. And we know what they found. The stone rolled away, the tomb empty, the body gone. And then, the impossible, the news that would turn the whole world over. He was not there. He had risen. He was alive. We do not know the exact moment the news reached Mary, his mother. The Gospels focus on Mary Magdalene and the other women at the tomb. But think of what it meant when the news reached the mother who had sat through that endless night. The mother who had held his dead body. The mother who had memorized the place of his tomb so she could come back and tend him. The mother who had endured the longest night of her life, believing her son was gone forever. Imagine the news reaching her. Alive. He is alive. After that night, after the cross, after the tomb, after the unbearable Sabbath, after preparing the spices to anoint a dead body, to hear those words. He is alive. The mind could scarcely hold it. The grief of the night meeting a joy too large to comprehend. And here is the deepest truth of that long night. The thing that makes it more than just a story of sorrow. Mary's grief was real. Every hour of that night was real agony, undiminished by any knowledge of what was coming. She did not get to skip the pain, because she was the mother of the Messiah. She felt all of it. The full, crushing weight of a parent who has lost a child. And then, when it seemed most permanent, most final, most hopeless, it was undone. The stone was rolled away. The grief was answered. The night ended in a dawn beyond anything she could have imagined. And that is why this night matters so much to anyone who has ever grieved. Because Mary's longest night tells us something. That the darkness of the first night, however total it feels, is not always the end of the story. That grief, however permanent it seems in the dark, can be met by a dawn we cannot yet see. Mary sat in the dark, certain her son was gone forever. And she was wrong, in the most wonderful way a person has ever been wrong. The night was real, but it was not the end. Step back now and look at the whole night. From the moment they placed her son's body in her arms in the last light of Friday, through the rushed burial against the setting sun, through the long walk home past a city lit for the feast, through the first unbearable hours in the lamplit house, through the endless silent Sabbath, through the second dark night and the preparing of the spices, all the way to the first gray light of the most important dawn in history. That was the night Mary lived through, the longest night of her life. And we tell it, not to dwell on sorrow, but because of who lived through it. Because Mary is not a distant, serene figure who never knew real pain. She is a mother who sat in the dark on the worst night of her life, holding a grief as heavy as any human being has ever held. She knows that night. She has been in that room. And that makes her a companion to everyone who has ever had to live through their own longest night. Because almost everyone, eventually, has their own version of that night. The night after the phone call. The night after the funeral. The first night in a home that is suddenly missing someone. The night when the world has ended and somehow the clock keeps ticking and you cannot understand how. If you have lived through a night like that, or if you are living through one now, then you have something profound in common with the mother of Jesus. She has been exactly where you are, and her night holds a quiet promise for yours. Not that grief is not real, hers was utterly real. Not that the pain can be skipped, she felt all of it. But that the night, however dark, however final it feels, is not necessarily the end of the story. Mary sat in the dark, certain all was lost. And then the sun came up on a morning she could never have imagined. The same God who let the night be that dark also rolled the stone away. She held her son as a newborn, and she held his body in death. She sat through the longest night a mother can endure, and then she held him again, alive. The night was real. The grief was real. And so, in the end, was the dawn. That is what Mary did the night Jesus died. She held him. She buried him. She walked home in the dark. She endured the longest, emptiest hours a mother can know. And she made it, somehow, to the dawn. If this gave you a new way to sit with grief, yours or someone you love, subscribe. Because we tell the deep human stories behind the figures everyone thinks they already know. And if you have lived through your own longest night, tell me in the comments. Tell me about the one you are missing. I read every comment, and this community holds each other. Thank you for sitting in the dark with Mary, all the way to the dawn. I'll see you in the next one.